Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of Northstar Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm Craig Picken. Hey, when I do these episodes, I really try to bring on some people that will inspire, teach, and educate the audience who's listening to them. And I can't think of a more inspirational person than my guest today. Mike Durant is the CEO of a company called Pinnacle Solutions, which is an employee-owned company based in Huntsville, Alabama. Its expertise is in training devices, modifications for aircraft, development, maintenance of technical publications, and engineering and training services. Its customers are the U.S. Department of Defense, Air Force, Army, Navy, etc., anybody that flies aircraft, various OEMs, departments like NASA, and a host of other customers in the space. I first heard of Mike back in 1993, and I'll set the stage. In late 1992, I was one of the first personnel into Somalia during Operation Restore Hope after the country's government collapsed and people were starving and the world came to their aid to deliver food. And I was on board the USS Ranger, flying E-2 Hawkeyes at the time. About 10 months later, Army Special Operations conducted a mission to remove a warlord named Mohammed Farah Aidid. And Mike played a big part of that. And his story was ultimately portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down, which many are familiar with. But getting Mike on board today, I really didn't want to talk about Black Hawk Down or his participation in Somalia or the ongoing, fame or however you want to call it, recognition that has brought to him, but more as a business leader who learned a lot from one very inspirational moment in his life. So it's a great episode. There's a lot of good stuff to learn from Mike. He's an inspiring leader, a great entrepreneur, rock solid CEO with a great company with a great reputation. So happy to have him on. Hey, Mike. So you started Pinnacle Solutions, what, you said 11 years ago, 2008?
February 2008.
How did that idea come your way?
So it's interesting, if you look at timing-wise, it was not good timing by most people's assessment. But for me personally, it was perfect. It was the culmination of two things. One, I felt like I had gotten experience from a really good set of prior positions. I was, obviously a user in the military, and then I got into the acquisition side on the military. Not deep, not in a program office, but in that unit I was in, we were able to perform some of those functions on a small scale, which actually made it better because it speeded things up. So, the nice thing was it wasn't a immediate transition from cockpit to business. We were able to learn a lot of the aspects of government contracting while still on active duty and still serving the unit. So it was just a great transition. And then once I got out, I worked for a small business for a while. I worked for a large business for a while. I was in BD. I was a programs manager. I was a site ops manager. So I got to see all sides of it from that perspective, and I felt like it really set me up well to be able to get things going on my own. I think a lot of people come out of experience that is limited, and they see opportunity, and there is opportunity there, and some people can be successful, but there's an awful lot you don't know if you don't have a broad set of experience, and I think it helped me a lot to have all of those experiences combined to help me understand how to put something together that could be successful.
And so you what was your goal when you started Pinnacle?
The goal was to bring the small business that I had worked for back to life. It was acquired, and I say that, hypothetically, we weren't really trying to bring that company back to life, but bring the culture and the feel and the success and the intimacy and all of that stuff that was part of that environment in that small business that was a perfect fit for me. We're all different. We all come from different backgrounds, and some people thrive in a large business environment. I don't. It's just not the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in the special operations world, and that is not a large business environment. It's a very small business-like culture where you have a lot of responsibilities and you have a lot of authority and you can act and you still have processes you have to follow, but they're streamlined, and it takes a lot of time and experience to build a skill set where you can handle those situations. But once you're there, it's awesome, and you never want to go back. So ending up in a large business was going back for me, and I didn't like it. So I wanted to create that small business environment again. And in short, we were saying in the first few days, we're bringing the band back together. We're trying to get this thing back to where it was fun to come to work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to people about that. I was just out in San Diego speaking at a conference out there, and one of the primary points I wanted to talk about was culture and understand who you are as a person, and what kind of company is going to work for you. People who grew up in large companies that are matrixed, where decision making is slow, don't necessarily do well in smaller companies where they may be taking out the trash too, and vice versa. People who are highly caffeinated are used to short decision making timeframes. Aren't going to necessarily do well at a big defense house or Airbus, an Airbus, a Boeing, a Lockheed Martin, et cetera. I mean, not that they're bad companies or whatever. In fact, just the opposite. But the cultures are totally different.
Right. And it's all about what's right for you. And it just wasn't right for me. And this is, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you, I think every person in the company looks forward to coming to work every day. But I think we've done a really good job creating a culture where we're doing everything we can to make this fun and to make it rewarding and make people, want to be here.
So how do you do that? I mean, when you talk about creating a culture that's fun, rewarding, and making people want to be there, that's easier said than done. What's driving Pinnacle every day to create a neat culture?
Okay. Well, first I said I'm not going to tell you that everyone here feels that way. I'm just telling you that's what we're trying to do. But when I started this, I looked back at the 160th Special Operations Unit that I was in for 13 years before I retired. And, in terms of organizational effectiveness and commitment to the mission and understanding, why we existed, I can't find a better example than that unit. And I'm sure it's true for other units within Special Operations Command, but it's certainly a very, very special place to be. And maybe it was that point in time. I can't tell you with any certainty that it's still that way today, but all I can tell you is when I was there, it was awesome. I mean, we worked hard, we played hard, we understood the mission, we totally committed to it, and it was everything I dreamt it would be when I first heard about that unit. So what I tried to do is figure out what is it that creates that, and then apply it here. And in some ways you can, in some ways you can't. But I think a lot of it we've been able to, and it starts first of all with people. I mean, you have to hire and you have to retain the right people. If you hire the wrong person, you got to get rid of them quick. And that may sound harsh, but the wrong person, which may not be a bad person, it's just the wrong person, is going to go contrary to the culture, thought process, may not, get along with everybody else, understand, how things operate here. And they just have to go find something else to do. It doesn't need to be ugly or, we always try to say goodbye to people on good terms. And we've had several come back because they realize, I had a really good thing going and I want it back, and they come back. So people are number one. Second is leadership and communication. I think, it's got to be authentic. It has to be engaging. I feel like I am in the trenches with everybody else. I mean, I make coffee. We're about to have 600 people in the company, and I'll make coffee. If there's no coffee made, I'll make it. And that's the whole mentality we're trying to get across the board, is that we can't just worry about what's in our very narrow lane. We have to worry about what's in the best interest of the organization and help out wherever we can. One thing we've done to help create that engagement is we are now partially employee owned. And when I was thinking about long-term, what is my ultimate exit strategy, nothing seemed to make sense until I found out about ESOPs. And ESOPs are a great way to solve that dilemma. Certainly for me, it's the perfect solution because it in the end, I benefit, but so do the employees, and they end up owning the company over time at no cost to them, and they don't lose any other benefits to go along with it. And what creates the engagement is that financial performance of the company directly affects their retirement savings, because really ESOP, if you stay for the long haul, it is a retirement savings plan.
Right.
So they can recognize that, hey, if I save the company a little money here, or I deliver early here, or we exceed customer expectations there, in the end, that's going to circle back around, improve financial performance of the organization, and then that trickles down to me in the long run. So those things, there's other things, but those two are probably the two most important.
There you go. So, you mentioned the 160th, special operations in the military is getting a lot of focus, the Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the 160th obviously is the special operations wing of Army Aviation. Tell me about, when you go to the 160th, what are they looking for? How are they hiring? And how are they distinguishing the right person from the wrong person? And how can companies do the same thing?
So the advantage the military has is they have much more time, and they have a lot more resources at their disposal. And I talked about this before in a couple of presentations I've done. If you think, I sat and I looked back at my career. What did it take for me to get to the point where I stepped in the cockpit and I was an asset for that unit? How much training was involved to get me to that point? I mean, it's years. It's literally years. And in industry, we can't do that. I mean, we have to hire someone who's going to get into the position fairly quickly. I mean, we can't say, well, I'm going to make an investment today and, they'll be able to do their job in 5 years. I mean, that economically can't be done. So that is an advantage that the military has. But, what is done, which should be done in industry as well, is first of all, you got to find people that meet the requirement, and that's just sheer numbers. I'll give you an example. The unit's looking for, at least at the time that I was there, 1,000 hours of flight time. I think it was 250 hours night vision goggles. You've been a pilot in command. You're qualified in the aircraft. You got good performance reviews. Your physical fitness level is, at X level. No health issues, no disciplinary action. So, that's the first screening process. And you got to go through that same process in a hire in industry. You got to have, if it's an engineer, they got to obviously have a degree in engineering. You want to see good experience in the type of work you're doing. You want to see, we're hiring right now for a senior position. I just looked at some resumes today. I look at things like, how often has this person moved around? If they've been jumping from place to place every year, I'm not so sure we want to invest the time in that. We're looking for people who are engaged and want to stay for the long haul. So you do that screening process, and then back to what the unit does. It's essentially a week-long interview. You go in. You take a flight evaluation, so you actually fly the aircraft, and you're evaluated by an instructor pilot so that, what was seen on paper in terms of your capabilities is actually true in the cockpit. You have to go hit a target. You fly night vision goggles. You're put into some stressful situations, that sort of thing. Then you take a swim test. You take a physical fitness test. You take a psychological eval. You get a medical evaluation. And then the final thing, once all that is done, you go shoot at the range. You do, basically just checking all these aspects of your capability. And then on the last day, you go in front of a board, and you go in there, and they try to put you in a stressful situation through questioning and, try to figure out who is this person really, and get something out of you about your personality. And, I always remember in my board, one of the things that I said that is true about me is that I will find a way to get it done. I'm a problem solver, and I am not going to give up. I'm going to figure out how to solve the problem. And I think that helped, argue the fact that, hey, because I didn't have a ton of experience, and I know they were taking a little bit of risk with me, but I've always felt that, being who I am and having that be part of my identity really helped in their decision to bring me on board. But then once you're through that and they say, okay, we're going to go ahead and train you, even though you're already a pilot and you can already do these things, you go into green platoon, which lasts a year. So that's why I say, you can't compare what's done in the special ops world to industry unless you're talking, a CEO. Obviously, CEO, you're going to want to spend a lot of time grooming and making sure that that person is the right fit. But the average employee in the company, you can't spend that kind of time. So it's critical to do that screening part correct, and then to make your interview effective. I've sat through interviews where people are asking just ridiculous questions and are meaningless. You really want to know, does this person really possess the skills that they say they have on paper? That's the most important. And then, are they going to be a fit for this organization? Those are the two things that, however you need to form those questions, but those are the things you got to determine. And you don't have a year, you have an hour, or you have whatever, if you do multiple interviews, which if you have the luxury of being able to do that, again, that's time well spent, because hiring is critical, and getting it right is, I argue, 80% of what it takes to be successful.
Are there some traits that you specifically look for? I mean, you worked with some high caliber for 20 years in the Army. You worked with some pretty highly caffeinated, high caliber operators. Are there some traits that you look for, that you saw from them, that you look for in the people you're hiring?
Yeah, it depends on what level you're hiring, obviously. But we are very, very strong on culture and values here. So we want to see alignment with our values. And obviously, our number one value is honesty and integrity. If we have any reason to believe that what this person is saying or what they have put in their application is not correct, that is a deal breaker. I mean, we had one situation where an individual put on there that they had a degree from a certain university, and we checked that, and they had attended there, but they didn't have a degree. And unfortunately, we liked the person. We thought they probably could do the job, but that's a breach of integrity, and we didn't hire them. And, you have to have those standards. And that's the other thing about those units is the standards are there for a reason. If you don't meet the standard or you break the standard, in most cases, you're probably not going to be there much longer.
Yeah, I read something a couple of years ago from a Marine Corps Harrier, the CO of a Harrier squadron, and he put it really succinctly. He said, if you lower the standards, you're not really lowering the standards. What you're doing is setting a new, lower standard. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's like, yeah, okay, I got 3 years of my, I went to college for 3 years. I'll put a degree on my resume, but almost isn't quite there. And
right.
then it becomes,
especially when it's something, yeah.
It just becomes an integrity issue.
Right.
And most people will say the same thing. Hey, look, if, what else are you what else are you fibbing about?
Or what else are they going to do once they work for us?
Right.
And they're, misrepresenting the truth to customers or each other or whatever. I mean, you just can't have that. Yep.
No, I got you. So, obviously, you hit the national stage back in the early 90s in Somalia. You think about, a situation that 99.99999% of the population would never go through. But I'm sure that changed you as a leader. Some way, probably a little bit more resolute. How do you think that experience helped you as a CEO of your own company, or has it had any effect at all?
No, you're right. It I don't know if I'd say it was a game changer, but it certainly took somebody. I was a flight lead in a special ops unit. I had done really well, so I'm not a slacker at this point in my life. But I think it, first of all, opened my eyes to what might be possible. I tell people if Somalia never happened, Pinnacle doesn't exist, because I just, I was happy with what I was doing. It was a great job, and I would have continued doing that probably forever. But it forced me to turn, and then getting the experiences that I got really opened my eyes to, well, there's some other pretty cool things in this world, and gave me the confidence to try. we all get asked questions about things that, are from all perspectives, and oftentimes get asked, what advice do I have for young people? And the thing that always comes to mind is don't be afraid to fail. And I think that's probably what it did for me more than anything, is that it took away that fear of failure. That, you can't win if you don't bet, is another way to say it. You got to go out there and push it to the limit if you really want to realize your full potential. If you either lack confidence or you don't, push the edge of the envelope, you're never going to get to where you could get otherwise. So I think that's probably what it did more than anything.
It's interesting. Your experience taught you to take some risks in life. Do you think that the people you're hiring, the people you're seeing out there, are they willing to share that experience, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that it's so much the risk that people are interested in as it is the culture. I think everybody wants to be part of a successful organization, and I'd have to put us in that category. I think we're actually at this point on the hairy edge of trying to keep our hands on the reins. It's things are just really happening fast. So it's a very dynamic environment, challenging environment. No 2 days are ever the same. And again, coming from a special operations community, that's the status quo. So that's what you're accustomed to, and I like it. I thrive in it, and I think we're looking for people that feel the same way.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The CEO of Bed Bath & Beyond used to have this saying, we're not in a hurry to make mistakes. And I always thought that was kind of the craziest business philosophies. I think I'm more of the opinion people should be in a hurry to make mistakes, at least, test the boundaries, make decisions, because, kind of not doing that is a sort of a mistake, or an error in itself, mistake in itself.
I agree 100%. We just had an opportunity that popped up in the last week that had we not been responsive and if we'd have been overly cautious, it would have passed us by. And ink's not on the deal yet, but it's looking pretty solid. And it's only looking solid because we responded right away. Even though we weren't really clear on how this was going to work, we were willing to go down the road, and it's potentially going to be the most profitable thing we've done in 11 years. Yeah,
it's interesting. Your business. So when I was at Gulfstream Aircraft, I was part of the big C-37 RFP, the Air Force, now the Army, the Navy, they all fly them. And I was shocked. There's a lot of risk that goes into government proposals. They can bury in a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to put them together. The due diligence and the bidding process is very expensive. Doing government doing business with the government is certainly not for the light of heart, or the faint of heart, I should say.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's some positives. The government pretty much always pays its bills, and that's a strong argument in favor of it. But you're right; it's very, very competitive. It's very complex, and it's easy to overlook something and put forth an offer that bankrupts you. I mean, it's the government is not responsible for making sure that you can execute at the price you bid. That's your job, and they'll do some price reasonableness on occasion, but they don't have to do it. And I've seen cases where people bid work, they didn't really understand what they were getting into, and they lost money. And if you're small and you lose money on a sizable job, that's enough to do you in.
Yeah, no, the government doesn't care. They just want, they want what you promised them. And if you're losing money, it's, your problem. They're not going to, I don't think they really like to go back and reopen the bidding process unless it's causing a huge detriment to them.
Right. Right. It's the risk is on you. There's no doubt about it.
What's the exciting stuff happening at Pinnacle right now? What are some of the more exciting programs? I know you're rebuilding, you're doing a lot of stuff in the Black Hawk arena.
We are, I mean, obviously my name gets associated with Army Aviation and Blackhawks in particular, so it's a natural fit for us, and we have a lot of expertise on that aircraft. So we're doing everything in support of it, maintaining, flying, technical publications, training devices, everything, all of the above. But the big change for us is we just won the largest contract we've ever won. We are now taking over the training center for all unmanned, well, I shouldn't say all, but the Shadow and Gray Eagle unmanned aircraft for the Army. It's essentially the Fort Rucker, which is the training base for helicopters. It's the Fort Rucker of unmanned systems for the Army. So it's a big contract, and we're going to do all the training. We're taking over the maintenance of the aircraft as well, and it's a 7-year contract. So it's a big, big, big win for us, and it's going to pretty much double the size of the company and put us to a workforce of over 700, counting our subcontractors, within the next 2 months.
That's a big win.
It's a huge win. It's one of the larger small business set-aside contracts that I'm aware of, actually. And it was a hard one to win, but we obviously put the right proposal on the table, and we got, essentially it was a perfect proposal, and the price was where it needed to be, and we're executing.
Congratulations on that. So I did some, obviously your background, you've been interviewed quite a lot of times. You've done quite a few podcasts. You got a great book out there. One of the things I like, you said that stuck with me. If it hurts if whatever you're doing hurts, keep on moving until it doesn't hurt anymore. Is that the way you run your company a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think some people feel like it's painful, maybe, because we really are running at 110% capacity here, and we try not to. We're trying to resource ourselves to be optimized, but it seems like every day that goes by, there's some new opportunity that comes our way that's just too good to pass up. So we jump in, and everybody rolls up their sleeves and attacks it. So it's we're still running. I don't know that you ever get to a point where you stop running. Actually, the larger you get, the more you have to win to keep it all occupied. So it's sort of this self-fulfilling, never-ending prophecy. But I enjoy it, and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. And I'm really proud of what we've accomplished, and I look forward to more great things in the future.
Do you look back on your 160th experience, and obviously there's the plan, and everybody jumps into the plan, and everybody buys off on the plan, and then the minute you start to execute, things there's some needs for adjustments. Do you really focus your cadre on everybody understanding the plan, or do you take it more as you come?
That's a very good analogy, and is exactly what happens. I mean, we do strategic planning, we do more short-term planning, and as you alluded to, as soon as you make contact with the enemy, which in this case is the program or the customer, not that we view them as the enemy, but the challenge, I suppose, things have to flex and people have to adjust. And the way we address that is by communicating as often and as openly as we can, and being willing to go outside of what would traditionally be viewed as our lane to make things a success. I mentioned earlier, it's, simple, stupid things like making coffee, but, if there's a proposal that needs a review, or there's a pricing activity that needs to be taken care of, or whatever, if there's somebody who's, overstressed and needs some relief, any one of us is willing to jump in and take that load off of that person in order to get the job done and keep the train moving and keep it on the tracks. And I'm proud of that. I think that's, the reason we are successful is we got people, really, really all in and completely engaged in the success of the company. Do
you try to get everybody to be a leader? Do you take that, do you take that military experience and say, hey, look, the commanding officer is a commanding officer until something happens where the XO needs to step up. And if the XO, gets injured or hurt, the first sergeant steps up. Do you teach that throughout your company?
We do focus on leadership. We have a formal leadership training program. Again, it's a disadvantage that industry has when compared to the military. We can't send people off for leadership training, so we have to figure out how to do it on the side, if you will. So we not only do we train people who are in leadership positions, but we train people who have been identified or aspire to be leaders. And all they have to do is talk to their supervisor and say, hey, I'd like to, manage people at some point in the future. Can I attend these things? And they're allowed to do that. We bring in not a lot of external speakers, but some. Normally what we do, and we do this once a month, is we just handle it internally. I mean, we have a lot of experience here, so why not take advantage of it? So we'll have somebody who's in a leadership position that presents something on effective communication, or, how to share good news and bad news with employees, how to do performance reviews that are actually effective instead of just a paper drill, those kind of things. And then, among the senior team, we came up with this thing that we call the Leadership Minute. At every 2 weeks, we do a staff meeting. Basically, we have other meetings, but this one is a standing every 2-week staff meeting. And at the end of it, we rotate the responsibility around for somebody to just talk for 2 minutes about whatever they want to talk about that has to do with leadership. They can go pull it off the internet. They can pull it from their own experience, a book, whatever they want, and then they just share that. And again, what we found is we got a lot of experience here. And some of it we would have never uncovered if we didn't do these little things. And I think it's helping. It's helping people that maybe don't have a lot of experience in it, and helping to make them at least understand what it takes to be a better leader. It's one thing to understand and aspire to do it. It's another thing to actually do it. And that's the challenge. I mean, you could train people all day, but if they don't embrace the concepts or they don't try to implement some of these things, then it's not going to be effective. And the hard part is that second part. Yeah,
it's always amazing to me. I always think about my background in corporate America, and companies are more than willing to spend $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year on a rah-rah sales meeting. They get all their sales, customer service people to one very nice hotel, and they bring in a couple speakers or whatever, and it's like a one-time rah-rah event. But they, the minute it's over, it's like a sugar high. It's over, and then everybody goes back to doing their old thing. And I always wondered why companies really didn't teach more leadership internally, and make it more a part of their routine.
Well, that is what we're doing, and I think it's working. I think it's having an effect. We get good feedback on it, especially from the younger people, because they wouldn't typically go to an event like that anyway. So. Right. They would be completely overlooked in a more formal, structured, annual kind of thing. So by doing it slightly less formally and taking it out of hide, we're really not, because it's just an opportunity for some of our senior folks to connect with some of these younger people, and that's worth its weight in gold. So
who's in charge of that program in your company? Is that an HR function? Is that a
Yes, I mean, HR is responsible for scheduling, yes. And we actually call it talent management. That's something we changed a couple of years ago. Whether that, has an impact on things or not is certainly debatable, but, we do think it's talent that we're trying to manage. So that's what we call it. But they schedule the sessions and do the communications. And again, I think it's working well, and we're getting good feedback.
So the one thing that everybody wants to know is ROI. Can you get a measurable ROI off that, or do you think it's more of hey, we really feel like it's working just because the results that we're seeing inside the company as a whole?
Yeah, it'd be hard to measure it specifically. I think it's more, it's going to manifest itself in things like turnover, and we also do manager assessments. So every employee, when they get their evaluation, they actually evaluate their manager, and the manager doesn't see it. It goes back through talent management, and I get to see it. So, those would be the metrics really that I would attribute to the effectiveness of this program, and our retention is really good. We don't have much of a turnover, and the manager surveys are actually pretty solid also. I mean, you're never going to bat 1,000, but we don't have really any problem areas that are systemic. So I think it's effective. I'm not sure how else you could measure it other than, do a survey. Did that make you a better leader or whatever at the end of the training? But I think, like I said, subjectively, I think it's working.
Gotcha. So let's shift gears. I don't want to take up all your time today. But going back to your personal experience, in Somalia, big event, country was watching, as close to a near-death experience as anybody could have. Personally, professionally, we talked a little bit about taking more risks. How do you take that and live your life now? You've got good family, large family. You raised 5-6 kids now.
Right, 6. Yeah. So a couple things. first, what I have told people is I will measure success at the end of my life if people say, hey, there's the guy who raised those kids, or there's the guy that started Pinnacle, instead of, hey, that's the Black Hawk Down guy. Because I don't want it to be my legacy. It doesn't mean that I'm not proud of what went on there. I am. It was amazing, the end result, and how the people of Somalia were affected, and how the overall effort is viewed is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what happened on the ground that day with the people that I know. It makes me very proud. But it isn't what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered for these other things. And if when we get to that point, I'll be very happy. And I think we're getting close. Actually, there's a lot of folks that deal with Pinnacle that don't even know that ever even happened to me. And again, I don't bring it up, and it doesn't come up in conversation. But it's one of those things that I'll never leave completely behind. There's no question about it.
Yeah, no, I got you. I think about it because, like I said, I told you before we came online, I was there 10 months before you were, a year before you were, day one, with the Navy, and it was almost a surreal event. But that's a pretty good legacy. Solid family man, good business leader, good track record. It's like T. Boone Pickens. I saw his final send off, and it was a great legacy to a great life, but a very generous life that he led. So appreciate you coming on. Appreciate all you did in the Army for the country, for Pinnacle, and all the people you employ. You must be really proud of that.
I am, and more good things to come. So we'll just keep cranking away.
I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Well, that sounds good.
Look forward to seeing more good press releases coming out of your organization.
That's the goal.
Thanks for coming on today, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care.